Evening, everybody. This is Anthony from Amped Airsoft, and today we're going to do a Pleb to Pro on how to use these things, because in all honesty, you guys ask us tons of questions, and I'm just going to put it in one video because I'm tired of answering them. Let's do it.
So honest.
Just being honest, man. Just being honest. Alright guys, so here's the deal. What we're going to do in this video is we're going to go through every single type of FCU that is currently available as of the production of this video for all of the systems. So if you have Wolverine stuff, you're going to pay attention to that part. If you have Fusion Engine and Jack stuff, you're going to pay attention to that part. And then if you have a brand new Mark II, you're going to pay attention to that. You can feel free to skip around, whatever you need to do, but all of it is going to be in one video from now on because I want to make it easy on myself so I can copy paste it and send it to you guys when you ask questions. So, as you can see, they are all, yeah, Matt's thumbs upping. Bam, that's how we feel about that. So, this is everything on display. We have an Inferno and a Hydra. Also, this will work for an SMP, but we didn't feel like ripping one out of a gun right now, but this will also work for an SMP. We have the Mark II, and then we have a Fusion Engine and Jacks, just so you guys know. So what we're going to do is we're just going to start with the Wolverine stuff, go to the Fusion Engine stuff, end on the Mark II. All right, let's pull some of this off the table. All right, guys, so what we have going on right here is we have the 3 current production FCU models for all of the Wolverine systems. This includes the SMP, Inferno, and Hydra, like I stated before. We have the basic FCU right here. We have the Spartan Edition board right here. And then we have the new Bluetooth FCU right here. So the first thing to bear in mind is that all of these FCUs are interchangeable with all of the HPA actual mechanical systems that Wolverine sells. So if you have an SMP, like an original SMP, all of these boards will work. If you have an Inferno or a Hydra, all of these boards will work. The only kind of technicality issue you might run into is if you're running a non-M4 or V2 gearboxed gun. The Spartan Edition, that's for an M4, so that's just kind of how it is. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk about them. So every single one of these boards have basically 2 adjustable functions on them. You have your dwell and you have your rate of fire. The traditional Wolverine board uses an adjustment method of a rheostat. A rheostat is basically a current regulating body that is used with a screwdriver to adjust it, or some kind of physical manipulation. Your dwell on your Wolverine board functions for both your nozzle dwell and your poppet dwell, because on a Wolverine system, the nozzle and the poppet are on the same movement. They're not 2 separate pieces, they're one piece. So, that being said, the dwell is going to adjust both of those at the same time. So if you have mags that don't feed, you're going to turn your dwell up to adjust your nozzle dwell, but that's also going to turn your DP up as well. Bear that in mind. That is the base setup for just the basic FCU. And then you have your rate of fire, another rheostat. You just adjust it to make it shoot how fast you want. It's really easy. Tuning these are not complicated, so very easy peasy. The Bluetooth FCU, you can adjust those 2 base functions either with the rheostats or with the Android-only compatible Bluetooth app. As of this recording, they do not have a iOS version of this yet, so if you're like me and you have an iPhone, lol, so you're just gonna have to do it with the old rheostats just like before. On the Bluetooth app, there are also a handful of other functions you can adjust, like the stiction and stuff like that, which we'll get more into with the PolarStar boards because you have a visual representation. But you can adjust that on the Bluetooth app for the Wolverine FCU right here, this guy. Otherwise, physically, it's not very much bigger than the standard Wolverine board, as you can see. It's only like maybe a 1/4 inch longer, and that's about it. And it's Bluetooth, so once it's in your gun, as long as it stays connected, if you have any connection issues, just unplug it, plug it back in. Bluetooth device should be able to discover it, and you can adjust all of your settings from there. Easy. Last board we have right here is the Spartan Edition board. This is built for a V2 gearbox. As of the recording of this video, this is the only Spartan Edition board that exists, although there could be plans for a V3 coming out pretty soon. But don't hold me to that. I don't know. I legitimately don't know. To tune the Spartan Edition trigger board, what you're gonna have to do is you're gonna have the gun switched to semi-auto, the trigger depressed, and then plug the battery in. Now the gun will be set for live firing to tune it, so always do this in a safe place. Don't ever do this like in the open where people are not wearing eye pro. Please be safe. Please be safe. Please be safe. What you're gonna do is once you get into programming mode, you're gonna hold the trigger down for 10 seconds, give or take, once you plug the battery in, and then the gun's going to fire. When the gun fires after you've held the trigger down, that's letting you know you're in programming mode. Then what you're gonna do is you're gonna go through your settings. Semi-auto adjusts your dwell, full auto adjusts your rate of fire. So basically what you're gonna do is you're gonna have your gun set on semi, you're gonna hold the trigger down, and then as it's firing, you're gonna hear it adjusting its dwell, and it's gonna go up. When it has a double fire, it's gonna cycle through the system again and go up. And as soon as you release the trigger, that's where it's gonna be set. That's really easy to do. It's not as good for precise tuning as either of these FCUs are right here because you can finely dial the rheostat in. But if you're gonna be quick and dirty and easy, this should get you like 90% of the way close to what you're trying to go for. Full auto, same deal. It's gonna shoot a short burst to let you know what the rate of fire is, and then it's gonna cycle through again, and then you just release the trigger whenever you're done. My suggestion is when you go to adjust the dwell, have a loaded magazine, be at your range, and when you are firing it, when the dwell is adjusting, you're going to watch your FPS as well as your groupings as you shoot, and release the trigger before the FPS starts to drop. As soon as the FPS drops, you've went too far. Let it cycle through again, and then stop there. As soon as you start having FPS variances and stuff, that's how you know you've adjusted your dwell incorrectly, but it's easy. So there you go. There's all your Wolverine products done. There should be no more questions. Last thing of note though is that on the SAW FCUs, there is an extra port for an aftermarket SAW box mag wiring kit that you can get from Bingo Airsoft or other companies like that. That's so that you can sync your box mag to your rate of fire of your gun so that it feeds continuously. But that's on the SAW kits usually. And you can get a SAW FCU with the SAW kit. So just keep that in mind. All right, guys, now we're gonna roll into the PolarStar offerings. Okay, so you have your fusion engine, your jack, and your soon-to-be released F1. Bear in mind that the jack and the F1, because they are single solenoid systems like the SMP, the boards are gonna run the same for the jack and the F1. Easy, right? All the settings are gonna be the same. When you get your PolarStar system, whether you got a fusion engine like this gorgeous green and purple nozzled beauty with a purple poppet from us, super swag by the way, or you get a jack like our custom swaggy jack one, or an F1, they all come with the same FCU. The thing with the PolarStar FCU is that it has two user profiles loaded onto it, one for a fusion engine, one for a jack. 90% of the people having problems with their jacks and fusion engines not functioning correctly is because they did not read the user manual and did not switch the user setting over to the correct system. They come from the factory set running on the fusion engine because that's the primary firmware. All you have to do is as soon as you boot the board up, switch it over and you are good to go. Easy. So what we're gonna do is we're just gonna open one of these up because functionally they are exactly the same. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna open one up, take a look at it, see what's going on. What we have here now is a powered up PolarStar FCU. First thing you're gonna note is that it does have already a secondary plug built into it to power powered box mags or things like that using the Bingo kit. That's gonna be right there. This will also work for if some ingenious wiring guys out there wanna do bolt holdover features and stuff like that. That's what this right here is for. With the PolarStar FCU, what you're gonna get, unlike the Wolverine FCUs, you're gonna get a programming screen, which allows you to read everything. As of this video, they have not released their miniature Bluetooth FCU, though that is coming eventually. But for now, this is what you get. It's not an overly big FCU, but it is the biggest of the three types of FCUs that are currently out right now. So bear that in mind, but this has been out long enough that 99% of fitment problems and stuff like that have been addressed by people with all the different types of guns out there. So if you can't figure out how to stuff this into your gun, you're not Googling hard enough. It's real simple. First thing you're gonna see as soon as you boot your system up, it's gonna say shot. All right, that's just what it's gonna say. To get into programming mode, you're going to move the stick, should be on safe, and you're good to go. So, first thing you're going to see is you're going to see the revision of the board. This is a revision 1.4 board. As of revision 1, all of the boards are dual boot. That means they have the firmware for a Fusion engine or an F1 in it. So from now on, if you damage your FCU, whether you have a Jack, F1, or the Fusion engine, you can buy the same FCU because they're all the same programming. And then all you have to do is just switch it. So that's your revision. Next thing you're going to see is your setting of what exactly the board is running on right now. This board I opened from a Jack kit, so basically this one right now is set up for the F1 because they just went ahead and sometimes they forget to do it, so be aware if you have a Jack and it says FE right here instead of F1, you gotta switch it. But other than that, that's how you do it. You can just move it up, says FE, move it down, says F1. Real easy, right? On your Jack and F1 settings, we're going to go with the Jack and F1 settings first because that's where this board is set, and then we're going to switch over to the Fusion engine and go through all those settings as well. Right now we have your RF setting. Your RF setting is basically your rate of fire. Real easy peasy. They changed the older generation boards used to have like some kind of hexadecimal code and timing thing that you had to memorize in order to figure out what your rate of fire is. So if you go back and look at our old FCU videos, we kind of explain it. But as of now, all of these FCUs now run on a literal system. So the number that it says on the FCU, where it says 19, 20, 21, 22, that is your literal rate of fire. Like 22 or 20, it's 23 rounds a second. Easy to understand. They simplified it just because they got tired of answering and fielding questions about it. So there you go. They went through the hassle of reprogramming the board so that you guys have something easy to understand. Your next setting on here is going to be your semi-auto rate of fire. What this mode does is it allows you to time how fast the system will allow it to fire on semi-auto. Some CQB fields do not like HPA systems because of the fast trigger response that they allow, where people can flutter the trigger really quick with speed triggers and shoot almost as fast as full auto. This setting right here can be adjusted so that it allows the system to have a max rate of fire on semi-auto. So that way people can't paintball trigger the guns too fast and shoot them too fast. You can set this between a setting of 1 and 99. 1 is as fast as it will cycle, and 99 is it will cycle once every 9.9 seconds. Seems excessive, but that's how the settings are set up on the board. So what you can do is you can, slow down everybody's rate of fire. Your next setting is going to be your selector modes. So this is your selector modes right here. This is your S1 and S2. So what this allows you to do is this allows you to change the firing mode on your independent selectors. So if you want your semi to be full auto, if you want your full auto to be semi, you can set the rate of fire on it. If you leave it at 0, that means that it is full auto, and then any number between 0.1 and 0.9 is a burst number. So if I want my semi-auto to be a 9-round burst, I'm just going to select this and then move this number right here up to 0.9 instead of 0.1. So there's that. Also, this is your full auto setting, your S2, for your selector position number 2. As you can see, it's set to 0, which is full auto, standard. This one right here, this is your lipo balance setting. I preach this all the time. Basically, this is what's gonna help you keep your mini lipos alive and keep your FCU from completely destroying them. If you have a 7.4 volt lipo, which is what we recommend for it, like these fancy little Amped custom lipo batteries that I designed the logo for because awesome, buy my stuff. If you set it to 0.2, that's for a lipo battery that is a 7.4 because a 7.4 has 2 cells, 0.2. If you have an 11.1, sets it to 0.3. Basically, this protects your battery from being overdrained and then killing it. So it will try to shut the system off before it drains the battery too harshly and then kills your battery. And it also helps balance how it draws power from the battery so that it doesn't blow the battery up. Real easy. I preach this all the time. Please set this setting before you go play. Please, 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 please do that. Now we're gonna get into some more complicated stuff. So this is your IS. That's the little tiny dash right here. It's supposed to be a little lowercase I. And then that 5 is also an S. This is your anti-stiction timeout. Your anti-stiction timeout is a countdown timer that enables the anti-stiction pulse when the timer reaches 0. This is set in 10-second increments and is automatically reset after everything. Okay, basically, stiction refers to how the current is flowing through your system. If you are not an electrical engineer or you do not have a firm grasp of this kind of stuff, don't mess with it. just don't. If you don't know what you're doing, don't mess with it. That's real simple, but it's on there if you care. The next one is your anti-stiction pulse. Your anti-stiction pulse is added to the poppet dwell when the anti-stiction timeout has elapsed. This is used to counter static friction or stiction. In many cases, is not needed and can be turned off by setting it to 0. Default is 0. Don't mess with it. Now we're getting into the actual good meat of this. This is your DP setting. Now, your DP setting on a PolarStar board is your dwell for the poppet. Basically what that is doing is that is telling the board how long to leave the poppet section open in order to allow air to flow through. Now the jack, since it's a single solenoid system, same as the F1, it has a different poppet style setup than the Fusion engine. The Fusion engine is going to be the higher performer on this setting. And it's going to be a lot more important for a Fusion engine setup than it is going to be for a jack. But basically, this is allowing airflow through your system. The poppet dwell variable controls how long the power is applied to the solenoid and allows adjustment of the gas volume released through the nozzle. The higher the volume, the larger the gas that's allowed. The dwell is set in 1 millisecond increments, although it's a global setting. The Fusion engine and jack do not have the same dwell values, so there are actually 2 DP settings in the FCU. Only the DP setting for the active FCU mode is shown. Okay, so on a jack, for example, jacks like to run with a very high DP setting to keep the nozzle from sticking while it's firing. So as you can see, the stock setting on this jack is already set to 50. This will go all the way down to 1, though you're gonna get constant jams and misfeeds and weird things like that, or like the nozzle won't move enough. And this will go all the way up too. So this can get really high. What you use your dwell for is to adjust how much airflow is going through the system. This is really important if you're using wide bore barrels, stuff like that, so you can adjust how much airflow is going through the system to help make your BB flight more consistent. Very important setting, keep that memorized. Also guys, if you're using a jack system, be aware that your DP setting also, because it's adjusting how much airflow is going through the system as well as the timing of the nozzle, be aware that it also helps you adjust for misfeeding mags and things like that. Much like the Wolverine systems that I put over here somewhere, like these guys, those settings kind of work in tandem to time your nozzle's movement as well as the airflow going through the system. So when you're adjusting your DP, you're also, the higher you make it, the more likely you are to make your mags feed. Just keep that in mind, something to keep going. All right, so as you can see, same board. We were just on F1. Now I'm gonna switch it to FE, which is for your Fusion engines right here. And we're gonna go through some of the system setups that are not on the F1 firmware. So let me scroll to them real quick. It has the same settings for your rate of fire right here, your semi-auto rate of fire, your selector switch position 1, selector switch position 2, your LiPo balance, those are all the same, your IS setting, your IP setting, your DP setting. Now, if you noticed, instantly by switching this over to Fusion engine, the DP setting I had on the F1 was set to like 60 something. The DP has jumped way down to 25. Now, the reason the DP has jumped way down to 25 is that the Fusion engine is a dual solenoid system. It has 2 solenoids. One solenoid controls function of the nozzle. One solenoid controls function of the poppet. The poppet moves back and forth inside this assembly right here. And by timing of the poppet, remember that's what allows you to have your varying amounts of airflow leave the nozzle. So on a fusion engine, since it has its own solenoid for each function, these numbers can be different. And also on a fusion engine, the DP setting works a lot better on a lower setting. On a Jack F1, you're going to want to have your DP higher because it only has one solenoid doing all the work. On a fusion engine, it has its own solenoid for this poppet right here. So you're going to want to run this as low as possible to help you save air and to make everything function correctly. Typically what I do on my fusion engine is I run my DP, sometimes I run mine as low as 15, and that's with a 10-inch barrel. I've seen a lot of guys run them even lower than that, down to like 10, 7, 5, depending on their barrel setups and what they're running. But just keep that in mind. I run mine at 15 on my fusion engine. There you go. The next setting you have is a DN setting. Now the Jack does not have that setting. The reason is because it's one solenoid operating the nozzle and the dwell at the same time, because it's one piece it's moving, doesn't have that setting. But like I said, 2 solenoids, you can time how the nozzle moves and you can time how the poppet moves. So this is your DN setting, or your dwell for your nozzle. Now the dwell for your nozzle basically times how long the nozzle is moving back and forth, and that allows you to adjust for mags that aren't feeding. Right now this DN setting is set to 14, which is very, very low. Since I usually shoot semi-auto only and I want to make sure that my shots are always leaving my barrel, I usually run mine up to like 35 or 40 because I am really cheap and I have garbage magazines. So you adjust this based on your worst feeding magazine. Basically you find the worst mag, load them all up, see which one spits the BBs out the slowest, then adjust this setting until that mag feeds flawlessly. And then all your other mags will feed well too, and then you're good to go. This is your delay for your nozzle return, or your DR setting. Basically that times how long this waits before it returns back into battery. So this also helps with feeding issues and stuff like that. It works in conjunction with the DN, though I believe that the DN is the easier to adjust of the two. I typically don't really mess with the DR setting too much. All I do is I just kind of make it matte. I kind of like run my DN setting, and then if it's having like function problems or anything like that, I'll adjust my DR setting until it works. But that's your nozzle return. And then the last one is the ever controversial closed bolt mode. Closed bolt mode, everybody has different opinions on closed bolt, but I'm going to explain kind of what it is. So on a fusion engine system, as you can tell, your nozzle is always adjusted forward. So when you shoot, nozzle goes back, BB goes up, shoots, nozzle returns forward. There you go, with the next BB in place. Closed bolt mode, basically how it works is that when the nozzle's forward, the air comes out first, starts to fire the BB, then it cycles to allow another BB in. So the theory is that allows you to have really quick first shot. Open bolt makes it function more like an AEG, where it shoots the BB and cycles the nozzle at the same time. I usually run closed bolt off, if you want my honest opinion, because I don't really think that it has any kind of positive bearing on performance. But that is something that people will argue till the end of time about semi-auto DMR settings and how closed bolt is more preferable or whatever. Just be aware that the default setting is off. Just so you know, that might be a hint. And there you go. There's your PolarStar board. Like I said, bearing in mind that the mini FCU for the Bluetooth has not come out yet, so we don't know if there's going to be any more revisions or updates to that, as well as the F1 is not out yet, so there could be some small revisions to that setup. But I have a feeling that the board is pretty much good to go because single solenoid systems operate very, very similar to each other just because of the nature of how they have to be built. So there you go. There's your PolarStar board tutorial. If you want my honest opinion though, guys, read the paperwork that comes with it. Read this, because everything is also in here. All right, guys. Now we have the final one to talk about. This is the Protech Universal Fire Control Unit, or the UFCU. This one is kind of neat. The first thing it does is it lives in a fun gray area between these other FCUs. It's easier to program than the PolarStar FCU because its settings are a little easier to work with, but it's not quite so simple as the Wolverine, and it allows you to finer tune it. So it lives somewhere in that gray area between the two. Also, fun thing to think about is that if you have a, let's say you have a, you didn't buy a Mark II, but you bought an Inferno or a Jack. The fun thing about the Universal Fire Control Unit from the Mark II, basically what you can do is if you buy the same trigger board and wiring harness that comes from the Protech, you can run these other systems with a Universal Fire Control Unit. Pretty neat. Pretty neat. But that's just another discussion for another day. First thing we're going to talk about is the battery life. The Universal Fire Control Unit is the longest lasting battery, I feel, total. But I mean, I bet you there's some Wolverine users with their FCU with no screen on it that's probably lasted for a long time. But especially since this one has a screen, this one lasts far longer than the Fusion engine on a battery. We've had our test gun on a battery for 3.5 months, and the battery still functions. It still has a charge, it still shoots. It draws so little that I think the average runtime on standby with this battery plugged in, ready to go, is I think 4 months. So this can be a game changer, especially if you are like me, because the problem that I find with the Wolverine board is that since it's a rheostat, I'm just kind of turning it and guessing it and just kind of feeling how the gun's shooting, which for simplicity's sake for manufacturing is not a bad idea, but I really like having a screen so that I can write down my settings and keep them with my gun, memorize them, or transfer it from gun to gun and see exactly what my settings are. I prefer having a screen. The Universal Fire Control also, in size comparison between the general Wolverine board and the PolarStar FCU, also comes in the middle in size as well. So that means that it's going to be a little bit easier to stuff into buffer tubes and pistol grips than the PolarStar board, but it's still a little wider, but a tiny bit shorter than the Wolverine board. So keep that in mind. I also like to point out that I feel that the screen, I think the screen's a tiny bit bigger, but whatever. That's subjective. So let's get these out of here. So first problem with the Protech board is that right now, if you're one of the early adopters for the Protech, there's no instruction manual for this that's printed out. You're gonna have to go to their website and print it yourself. Not a big deal, but you know, like it would be nice to have it in the box. So once you plug the battery in, boom, Universal Fire Control Unit. Oh man, yeah, look at that. Super easy to understand what that means, huh? What you're gonna do is you're gonna press up or down on your board, on your trigger board, control okay. Basically what you're gonna do to move through all the different settings is you're gonna use your little joystick, just like with a Fusion engine. It's up and down on this one, and you're gonna cycle through everything. So, up and down lets you know what revision your board is. Since this is the first edition of the Protech board, this is revision 1.0, super new and shiny. All right. First setting, you're gonna go left and right to get to your settings, and then you're gonna adjust them going up and down, just like you would on a Fusion engine board. They tried to keep it function-wise for programming very similar, so that way guys who have already a Fusion engine system can jump right in on this and know what they're doing. The first setting you have is your PR setting. It selects between your different profiles. You can have up to 3 profiles saved on this. So if you have different uppers, you can save all your settings for your different barrel lengths and stuff like that in your different user profiles, and then just select through them. Most people are never going to use this because they're just going to get a gun that shoots really good with whatever they prefer and then never touch that again. But I mean, it's neat in case people care about switching their uppers. Your next setting is your DC setting, and then the setting after that is your DF setting. Now, these are very important settings, and these are also kind of cool. With your fusion engines and with your PolarStar jacks and F1s, you have a DN setting or a dwell, or I mean a DP setting, which you have a dwell for your poppet. The DC setting and the DF setting are the DP setting, but there are a lot more fine adjustments. So this is your dwell. Your DC setting is your dwell course. You can adjust this from 1 to 99, and that is in a 1 millisecond interval. That's the exact same as the DP setting for the fusion engine. So if you're used to, I didn't know that knife was open the whole time. Oops. So if you're used to using a fusion engine board or anything like that, same amount of timing in between each one. This is your course setting. And the reason they call it course is because it's only in a 1 millisecond timing. Then what you're gonna do is you're gonna bump it over to DF. This is your dwell fine. This is in a 0.1 setting of a millisecond. So what you can do is fine tune this FCU to a perfect dwell for your gun. The PolarStar could get really close. The Wolverine can get really close because they're, within 1 millisecond adjustments. This can go down to 0.1 millisecond, 1/10 of 1 millisecond on your fine setting. This value goes from 0 to 0.9. As you can see here, I've set this to DF 0.9. That is 9/10 of 1 millisecond. Basically what that does is that allows you to run your FCU and your dwell settings as sensitive as you need them to make your shots fly as perfect as possible. If you're a tinkerer like me, and you really want to get your FCU to actually make your system perform perfect, this is a really great new addition. And since it's a universal fire control, chances are, if you have a fusion engine or any other system, you could probably get this to work. So your next setting, that is going to be your static friction setting, or your DS setting. What this is a setting between 0 and 9, and what this does is as the unit sits, so let's say you're playing at a Milsim West game or a sheep game, and you've been sitting there for an hour or two and you haven't shot and it's cold and your system isn't warmed up. When you go to pull the trigger on your system, it's gonna bump your it's gonna bump your dwell settings up to make sure that the system functions and fires. Because if you run your dwell settings very low and your gun sits for a while, there's chances that what's going to happen is you're going to have a dead shot on your first trigger pull. This setting allows you to adjust that dwell up so that when you pull the trigger in a rest state, it blasts the system with a little more juice than it's used to make sure that it functions, and then it immediately resets back to your typical settings that you have in your other dwell settings. This is a cool feature, especially if you play places where it's really cold. I can't count how many times I've had my fusion engine, especially my fusion engine, the poppet kind of stick because my DP setting wasn't high enough for how cold it was outside. And basically it just kind of freezes up and doesn't cycle well. This juices your system. So if you play somewhere where it's cold, before you go to play, bump this setting up really high, and it's just gonna power through that cold and make the system function. Super, super cool, super cool. I like that. Your next setting, real bare bones, this is your rate of fire setting. Same thing as the fusion engine and F1 board. Basically, it's just set for how many rounds you want to fire per second. So you adjust it up, you adjust it down. Right now it's set for stock is 20. You can put it wherever you want. It's whatever. Pretty simple. Your next setting, that's your BR setting, or your burst rate. Basically what that is that's how many shots you want to fire when you pull the trigger on full auto mode. So right now it just says alpha or A. That just means full auto. And you can also set it from a burst from 1 to 5. So a 5-round burst down to a 1. I mean, I'm gonna be real honest with you. I think a 9-round burst from a fusion engine's full auto setting is kind of just that's ridiculous. I don't know too many fucking people who would run it like that, but that's what it is. So on this one, it's only 1 to 5. Your SL setting right here, this guy, that is your selector reverse. Basically, what it is right now it's on N, which is no. That means that it's set up for an AR-15, which is safe, semi, and then auto. If you switch this setting on, whoop, flips it all around. So it's good for like guns like G3s, MP5s, weird things like that have weird selector plates and weird things that, you know, weird guns, weird stuff. So that allows you to reverse your selector places. And then your last one right here, as you can see, this FCU is a completely virgin, unmolested FCU. And you have a shot counter right here, all zeros. It displays the shot counter in hexadecimal, and it's shared between every profile. So basically, no matter which profile you're running the board on, it keeps track of all the shots total that the board fires. So bear that in mind, so your number is not going to be just for whatever profile you're on. But this allows you to keep track of how many times this FCU has cycled. So there you go. And then your last setting, oh, guess what? Boom, you're back to the title screen. And that's it. That's how you program your universal fire control. So, seems real easy. Bear in mind, yeah, like I said, if you wanted to run a jack or an SMP with the hardware, electronics from a Mark II system, you have to get the trigger board, wire harness, and FCU all together. But you can do that. This also lasts a long time, and it has a screen, which makes it very easy to program. And it also has really fine adjustments for your basically combined DP setting. So there's some pros to that. Cons being that also, like I said, it does have a screen which can break and a joystick which can break, like the PolarStar FCU. So that's something to keep in mind. But there you go. That's how you program your Mark II board. All right, guys, so that's been a Pleb to Pro on how to FCU everything. Thanks for checking us out. Check out all our other videos if you need any help doing anything. Want to watch some gameplay videos, stuff like that. Check us out on social media. This has been Anthony. Talk to you guys later. Deuces.